Okay, going to make a pipe threads. So we're going to start with a spline, and what we're going to do is we're going to get a helix. Okay, and then let's center the helix so it's at the center of the world. Okay, and so now what we're going to do is set up some parameters for it. Okay, so for the helix, I'm going to want 6 turns, and then we want the radius 1 and radius 2 the same. Now, I don't care what the radius is, it doesn't really matter, and to a certain degree, it doesn't matter what the height is. Okay, so we'll go with something like this. The main thing is that the spiral does not flare. Okay, so it's the same at the top it is at the bottom, and I want 6 turns. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I need to control the vertices that are going to be on this spline. So we're going to put a normalize spline on this. Okay, now when you first put it on there, it'll kind of distort it, and that's okay. And then we're going to go show knots so we can see the knots. And then we're going to go by knot count. Okay. Now, what we're having to do here is we have to get these knots to align to each other, so because we're going to weld this together into quads. And the magic number is 73. Okay. Now, the next thing I have to do is I have to turn these knots, which are the vertices on the spline, I have to turn them to linear. Right now they're curved, and if I put an extrude on this, which I'll go ahead and do, and I extrude up, we'll turn our wireframe on, you're going to see it automatically subdivides this to keep it round. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to put an edit spline on this, okay, on top of the normalized spline. Then I can grab all of these vertices, and then I can right click and I can convert them to corners. So now it won't subdivide in between. So now when I extrude this, they're going to be like this. Okay. So the trick that we're doing here, and this is just based on the way that I build pipes and threads on pipe, is I normally build a pipe that has 12 sides. We want something divisible by 4, and so 12 works for me. Okay. So if I put an edit poly on this right now, we can go edges and we can count this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then you'll see these align to each other there. Okay. All right. So now when we're doing this extrude, I have a choice here. Eventually I'm going to need a section down the center here, and I can do it right now on segments, but for some people that kind of confuses them. So if that confuses you having this many lines in here, you can leave this off and we can put it on there later. Okay. All right, so now what we need to do with our extrude is we need to have it so that this closes up. This gap here closes up. So that's overlapping. That's not enough. So we'll say maybe 70 here. Okay, let's try 90. That's too much. So maybe 8.4 or 0.84. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just got to be close. And that looks pretty close. All right, now then what we're going to want to do here with our edit poly here is you'll notice these normals are backwards. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and select all by Control A, selecting all of the faces, and then we're going to flip those so it's facing out now. So now we want to weld this. So what we do is we go to Vertices, Control A to pick all the vertices, and we can kind of get into where we can see this area right here where these are overlapping. So now what we're going to do is come in here, weld, and we're going to hit the weld settings, and by default, if it's close enough, it'll weld, which you can see that did that. You can see that that went from there, and then it welded it. But if that doesn't weld, then you may need to pull this up a little bit. But what you can't do is pull it up so high that it, collapse all this stuff in there. Okay? So we want to weld it, and 0, and then the default is 0.039, and if you got it close enough, then that'll weld that. Okay, then we're going to check that in. So now this is one continual object. Okay. All right, so now we need to put that center point in there like I was talking about before. So what you can do now is grab this edge and go ring. It'll go all the way around it, and then we can go in here to our connect, and if you have not messed with the connect, then you can just click it, and then it'll put a ring down the center. Now if you've messed with this before, because it remembers the last setting, it could be setting for something else. We want it to be 1 and 0, 0, and that'll put a piece right down the middle. All right, so then the next thing we want to do here is scale. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to scale, and we want to make sure this is on view and that this one is on its center right there. And then we only want to scale on this edge, not the center here, but this edge here. And we want to scale it in. We want it to go in, something like this. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, so now the next thing I want to do is I want to take these edges, and I'm going to I can't double click this right. I have to go here and select all of this top. So I'm holding down the control key to select this top edge. Okay, get all of those. And then I'm going to go move, and I'm going to constrain this. I'm going to hold down the shift key, and I'm going to drag it up like this. Okay. All right, so now I want this to be flat. Okay, so we want to go over here and do make planar, and that's going to be on the Z axis. So when I click Z axis, you'll see, and I'll undo that so you can see it again. This is make planar. Okay, this is under your edit geometry, and when I click Z, it's going to flatten that out. Okay. All right. So what I want to do now is go to vertex, and what I'm going to do is do target weld, and I'm going to weld this vertex to there and this one to there. Okay. Now I want to do the same at the bottom. So I'm going to come in here, spin around this. Okay, once I get that, hold down the shift and constrain it. Make sure you're on the blue arrow, shift and pull it up. Okay, then same thing. We're going to make planar on the Z, and that'll flatten that out. And then target weld. Okay, so we're going to go target weld here to here and there to there. Now the other thing I've got to do is I've got to weld these seams down in here where I put this together, because that's not welded. So I can grab those and hit weld, and then the one up the top, which will be right here. Okay, so I want to select those two. Make sure you're not picking anything on the other side, and then weld those. Okay, so that should be tight, watertight, and so we can go ahead and put a mesh smooth on there just to kind of look at it. And a couple of iterations, and you'll see that stays all together. Okay, so we'll turn that off. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to squash this. Okay, so I'm going to right click and I'm going to go scale, and we want to scale it on the Y, and then we'll squash this down. So something like that. All right, it works. Smooth it. And then we're usually going to want to put some locking loops to hold these edges. Okay, so on this edit poly right here, we're going to go swift loop, and then I'm going to put one that's a locking loop around there. Okay, we need to do that at the bottom too. All right, then we also need to do a locking loop on this side. Okay, so it's on both sides of that. Okay, and it'll go ahead and it'll put one here, and if you'll notice, that's a quad in there, and that's a quad in there. So we deselect those, my mesh smooth, and that'll sharpen those up so they look like threads. Okay, now let's go to the front. Let's zoom in on this. Okay, we need to terminate this up at the top. So we'll say this is going to be the pipe down here, and this is going to be the end of the pipe up here. All right, so we want to bring this down a little bit. As a matter of fact, I would tell you another thing we probably want to do is go ahead and add another swift loop, a little bit here and a little bit there. Okay, which will help this when it's subdividing. All right, so now we're going to go bring this down a little bit, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this in so it kind of goes in like so. And now I'm going to hold down the shift key and scale it in again, and then I'm going to go ahead and collapse that. So you can hit left click and go collapse here. So you right click and then go up to collapse. There's also collapse right here, okay, which will collapse that. Okay, so that's going to round that some, and we want it a little bit crisper. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put a locking loop, say here and there, and then we want this to be quads up here. So what I have a tendency to do is to go right where this little tuck is going. You'll see this is kind of going in right there. Doesn't have to be there. That's kind of where I do it. Hold down the control key, and then we're going to select every one of these. Oops. And you might want to do this back face right here to make sure that you don't pick something on the back side. It's easy to do, like I just did right there. Okay, here I'm going to go to my pick, control key, there, 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 and then control backspace, and now those are all quads. Okay, so there's kind of the end. Then what we want to do, and this is kind of the way I do it. Okay, I'm going to make a copy of this. I'm going to go move, hold down the shift key, and just make a copy, and I'm going to park it right up above it. just as a measuring tool, okay? Because what I want this to do is to taper a little bit. So what I'm going to do is isolate just to hide that for a minute, and I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to select all of these vertices across here, but I don't want those last two rings. I don't want those. So I want everything except for those bottom two rings. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put an FFD on this, okay? FFD, and what we want is the cylinder one, okay? This is free-form deformation and allows us to manipulate it with a manipulator on top of the vertices, and I want the cylinder one since this is a cylinder. Okay, now this has 12 divisions around it, so you're going to go in here to set your number, and we want 12 sides, and then we want 2 radial, and we want 2 heights. Okay, now what this is going to allow me to do now is I can open this up and I can go control points, and I'm going to drag a box around these control points at the top here. Okay, then I'm going to scale here, scaling it in a little bit. And we can end the isolation, and we want to make it so that it'll slide right inside of that. So that's our goal, is to make sure that it's tapered enough that it can slide right inside of there. And that looks pretty good right there. Okay, so we'll hide that other one. Okay, now I don't like that vertex being out right there. I may do that later. Okay, I'm going to make a clone of this. Okay, so I'm going to clone this. I think I must have actually grabbed that part over there, but I can fix it, no problem. All right, so we're just going to make a clone of this. I'm always making a clone so I can make a copy so that I can go back in time if I don't like something about it. Okay. So now I'm going to right click and I'm going to convert this to an editable poly. Make sure you do not have your mesh smooth on. As a matter of fact, what you might want to do instead of doing that is I can collapse it. I want to collapse it all the way up here. So if I select this FFD right here and I go collapse to, it'll collapse all of that up to that mesh smooth. Be sure you're not getting that mesh smooth in there. And somehow, and I don't know how I did it, I accidentally moved that vertex right there. So I need to fix that. And that needs to go back in there. Somehow I grabbed a hold of that. I'm not sure how I did that. Okay, so that all looks good. Okay, and then my mesh smooth. And then there is the end tapered. And if I unhide this other one, you'll see that this tucks right inside of there, so we can screw inside of another pipe. Okay, and then what I can do here is I'm going to make a copy of this. I'm always making copies, clones. Make a copy. I'm going to turn that one. All right, so this is the one that I'm going to manipulate. All right, I'm going to dump the mesh smooth off right now. And so what I want to do is make a copy of this. Okay, so I'm going to clone it right in place. And then I'm going to go rotate. And then I need to turn the rotate snap on. And then I want to rotate it 180 degrees. Now this is where a lot of people kind of mess this up. Okay, and I'll show you why. I'm just going to hide this one. What people want to do is do a mirror or a symmetry to get the other side. So they'll go symmetry and they'll go on the Z, and then I can Pull this down, and there you go. I've got it symmetrical on the other end. The problem is it changed which way the threads were going. We don't want to change. So now this screws in going right and this screws in going left. So you can't really use a mirror or a symmetry to do this part. Okay. What you have to do is make a clone of it and then copy it. And so now the threads they go the opposite directions, which is what it needs to happen. Okay. So I'm just going to move this down a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to attach these two together, and then I can grab, holding the control key, grab these two edges, and then I can bridge that. And now this puts this all together as one thing, and I really do not need that edge right there, so control backspace, and I don't need this one, control backspace. And now when I put a mesh smooth, turbo smooth, whichever one you like to use. And now what I have is a pipe that's got those threads on both ends. And then, of course, I can easily manipulate that at any point by just grabbing this, the vertices, and just saying, well, I want my pipe to be that long. And by having this have 12, that matches up with my other techniques that I show on creating pipes, and I'm always using 12 sides. Okay, so there you go. That's how to make threads, a simple way. Okay, making pipe threads. Okay. All right. Hopefully that helps you guys. All right. Thank you.